Alex, our friend and colleague Chuck Rosenberg made this parallel to Michael Cohen, and it's such an apt one, that Michael Cohen was known during 2016 for going on TV and saying, I'd take a bullet, and I can't do a good Michael Cohen voice, so I won't try, but I'd take a bullet for the guy. He then cooperated in not one, but two federal investigations into him, and SDNY and Mueller, and he is now currently, that we know of, cooperating in two more in the state of New York and the Manhattan District Attorney. I mean, when one flips, one tends to flip pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lesson of the Trump era, too, which is henchmen don't always stay henchmen, right? Like when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And if you have learned anything from the Trump era, don't rely on the same sort of underworld mafiosi characters are not going to save your hide when the rubber meets the road. And that is unfortunately a lesson that Matt Gaetz seems not to have learned. I mean, the fact that he allowed this man to procure potentially minors, violating laws around sex trafficking, and that he did so with impunity, with no thought towards what if things go south, is all you really need to know about the strategery at play here. I mean, we have witnessed on center stage what happens when one of the cronies flips, and it is an ugly, ugly thing. And here you have a congressperson who seems to have basically replicated some of the worst sins of the Trump years with no lessons learned.
No, and it is a great way to think about what Matt Gaetz could be facing, Mike Schmidt. You think about how the White House was so rocked and so haunted and so obsessed with tearing down Michael Cohen, and perhaps with some success. We don't know everything he's been through, but it is usually powerful testimony from someone who once was willing to do just about anything for someone who becomes a target of an investigation. Does Matt Gaetz seem to understand that that's what Greenberg could represent for him?
I'm not sure what Matt Gaetz understands at this point. But what I think we have to keep our eye on in the Greenberg situation is that by entering into this plea with the government, it's a really sort of important, delicate dance. Greenberg has to be fully truthful with the government if he were to cooperate. He cannot tell any sort of lie. He has to tell them everything, any type of criminality that he was a part of. And it's not always a foregone conclusion that that if you plead and if you cooperate, that you're going to get a massive reduction. If you look at someone like Michael Cohen, Michael Cohen would say that he provided the government with extraordinary cooperation. There's significant things from him in the Mueller report, obviously the case that came out of SDNY about the payments. But at the end of the day, Michael Cohen received a pretty stiff sentence in prison for the crime that he had pled guilty to. So, there's a lot more investigation to play out here. There's a lot more of the game to go, in sort of a bad tortured sports analogy.
And Renato, if you could just pick up on Mike's point, I mean, does that incentivize a defendant facing the kind of charges that carry mandatory minimums, to come back to where we started, to be as cooperative as they want? Or do you see someone who tries to hedge their bets, thinking that someone powerful like Matt Gaetz can somehow, I don't know how Matt Gaetz could help him in a criminal predicament, but how does a defendant in that kind of trouble usually conduct themselves?
They usually are eager to do everything they possibly can to help the government. And that's because, first of all, the government requires that. That's what the government's going to tell them. And frankly, if they don't help the government enough, they won't potentially have fulfilled their end of the bargain. They need to provide substantial assistance. And the judge is ultimately going to make a qualitative determination. In other words, obviously, the judge is going to be thinking about and considering the extent of the cooperation, and the government will be giving input to the judge at that point. So the judge will rely a lot on the government to say, the prosecutors to say, for example, we thought he really did everything he could. He provided a lot of help. We wouldn't have made our case without him. So all of that's going to be detailed for the judge. And really, for somebody in his situation who's facing a lot of time behind bars, every month that you can get shaved off there matters.
And Alex, I want to come back to a place where I think you started, that there is certainly conversation about whether or not he survives as a sitting member of Congress. But you talked about him sort of persisting and landing perhaps in the right-wing media ecosystem. And it's difficult to argue that there are any standards for that universe. There They're one and the same, though, these days. I mean, it's hard to say whether there's, in the Trump era, whether it was state-run media or media-run state. That has its own sort of bucket of consequences. That someone like Matt Gaetz, no matter where this investigation leads, is there's no doubt in any of our minds that he'd likely be welcomed in that universe.
Yeah, I mean, it increasingly feels like it's all just part of one long con, right? It's about a grift. It's about misinformation. It's about, it's about using power, whether it's the power of broadcast media or the power of elected office for your own ends, whether that's sexual escapades with minors and your wingman, whether that's grifting the taxpayers, as Joel Greenberg apparently did, whether that's grifting the American public. It all just feels like it's wrapped up. It is. You ask what is, and I hate saying this to you, Nicole, because I know you're a principled person and this party has become a shell of what it once was. But what is the Republican Party? What is the moral center of it? If both the elected leaders that are Republicans and the conservative echo chamber that fuels the Republican Party, if it's all about misinformation and nothing but the naked pursuit of power, what's left? What are the policies that anybody even agrees on anymore? What remains? It's an incredibly sad state of affairs that failure in the most spectacular fashion as a congressperson leads to no punishment, but future lucrative success on the One American News Network. I mean, what has become of both sides of that coin?
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.